First of all, I want to thank my friend, Ambassador Nobrega, whose cooperation and solid support we have had the privilege of receiving, as indeed of his predecessor, to further India's biofuel, green energy transition. And I think that is an ongoing process, and a process whose potential, I think, still remains to be discovered. Thank you very much, Tarunji and Shishirji, for addressing us. I had the privilege last year also of being with you in a similar session when the theme was Energy Transition Solutions for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Today, you might ask, and I know I have some friends there on a table who keep asking what is new. I want to start by addressing one or two affectionate remarks to them. You could ask, why do I keep coming to such events? Well, one is that I happen to be Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas, and I think this ministry, my ministry, has the privilege of dealing with several very crucial segments, not only of the trilemma of availability, affordability, but most important, sustainability, the green transition. If our OMCs, who have, I think, 75,000 retail stations throughout the country, if there is a shortage of energy at any one of them for even a few hours, our social media goes on fire. And some of that fire is reserved for adjectives which are not describable in a polite setting like this. And I'm often at the receiving end of those. But the fact that I have been relatively insulated from that kind of comment is because they have ensured, they and the private sector retailers by and large, have ensured that in the last 2 or 3 years, there has been no shortage felt anywhere. I mean, there could be a natural occurrence, excess water, difficulties of transportation, but even then, our colleagues have carried gas cylinders, repaired pipelines, all in real time. On affordability, we have allowed not only the market to make a determination as to what can be carried, but there has been a conscious attempt by the government, particularly the Honorable Prime Minister, to make sure that the consumer is insulated from the turbulence in global markets. That becomes very necessary when you look at the fact that our import dependence for crude is very high still. In spite of the fact that we are doing very well in E&P, we are doing very well in enhancing the production from existing stock, etc. But I think when it comes to green energy, I think we have a very good story to tell. Not that we don't have a good story to tell elsewhere, but since this session is on green energy and the Biofuels Alliance, I'll spend a few minutes in context setting. I read a report in a respectable South Indian newspaper, which is a national newspaper, highly respectable, that our biofuels policy has been characterized by confusion. And the gentleman who wrote it, I don't know which side of the bed he got out of on the morning that he wrote it, he says, we have been constantly revising our targets. Now, I got up in the morning and I said, maybe my advancing years and failing eyesight, I'm reading something wrong. Yes, we have been changing goalposts, as he says, but we've been changing goalposts to produce more and get it done faster. I mean, when I was ambassador to Brazil, a country which I have great admiration for many reasons, but the biofuel story is one of the most important parts of that collaboration. We have many others. With all the will in the world, the government till 2014, with all the will in the world, they could not produce biofuel blending more than 1.5%. We had set a target then of 10% blending, 5% blending in 10 of our states and union territories. Only in 10 of our states and union territories. We couldn't even do that. So when this gentleman writes about our revising targets, well, yes, I think my friend Shishir put it beautifully. He said in 2018, it was a different world. In 2018, we were not sure of what we were doing. We had started the biofuels blending program, but we had still some uncertainty, some anxiety. So why do I attend these meetings every year? Not because I like to repeat myself, because I think I need to point out the nuances. The Honorable Prime Minister, to whom I give total credit for the biofuels. It's very easy for all of you guys to say nice things about me, and all of you have said nice things. The ambassador said nice things. Tarun's since he was much younger, he has been my friend. Shishir has become my friend. You say nice things about me. But the fact is, I only joined this ministry 3 years ago. This program predates my association with the ministry. And the Prime Minister set a target of 10% blending of biofuels by November 2022. That's a fact. It's recorded. And after that experience of not being able to do more than 1.5%, we today had a situation that we'd completed 10% blending 5 months in advance. So yes, there's no confusion. There's absolutely single-minded, forward-looking trajectory, which is what? You see, if you are not doing something, you can have a desire for doing something. I see many of my young friends who are entrepreneurs sitting here. You're young, you're bright, you want to start something, you go and raise money in the market, a venture capitalist, you have a good idea, it's evaluated by the banks, by the venture capitalists. But till you've done it, you're not sure. So once we got that confidence that we can do 10% and we did it before time, we revised the target again. We said we had committed to 20% blending by 2030. We will bring that forward by 5 years and complete it by ethanol blending year 2025, which is by October. Now, is there confusion in this, or is there single-minded this thing? I think anyone who makes a comment like that, I'm not singling out the name, but everybody knows whom I'm talking about, should literally go and do a little bit of homework. I mean, I can understand somebody in social media posting whatever they like. Minister's no good. When I said the hockey team has done very well, they said, yeah, but what about X, Y, and Z? I mean, no relationship. I can have a discussion with you on X, Y, Z also. No, so I'm coming to the point that today, unlike even last year, it's an even better story. Last year when we met, I think, at around the same time, I was sure about 20%. Last year, I was sure about that we'll receive 20% because unlike most of you, I monitor targets like what is the international price of oil, what is happening, UP is supposed to set up 100 plants, CBG, kya ho raha, etc. And not that the reports coming. But this year I can tell you, if you look at the September figures, we've done what? 16.9% or something, 16.5%, my God. And I don't know, my friend here was telling me, Tarun was telling me that agla bhi tender, etc., it's already, out and subscribed. So today I don't agonize about 20% at all. I mean, barring some unforeseen occurrence here or there, we will blend 20%. I don't agonize about availability of feedstock. You know, in a large country like India, you can have any kind of problem anywhere. But does your policy have the inherent responsiveness to shift when you face a problem? You're facing an impediment, you go around it. This is the classic story of uh, you know, ethanol blending based on one feed and a shift from there to another feed where you went from 0 to what? 39%. And by the way, Master Shishir was telling me just now that he's setting up 5 ethanol plants in Brazil. So I said, are you sure? Why would Brazil is a way leader? And says, no, but we have set up the first and we are doing so and so. Because the Brazilian experience is in one feed. He has experience here doing another feed. But I would be delighted to have Brazilians setting up plants here, investment coming from there. This is the story of international biofuels collaboration. An entrepreneur in Ahmedabad studied the global map, and he discovered that unlike India, some of the countries on a large continent do not have the facility of clean cooking gas. And I'll come to that in a minute. That's part of the story. We supply clean cooking gas to the beneficiaries of our Ujjwala scheme for as little as 5 or 6 cents in a day. And we supply clean cooking gas for non-beneficiaries, to normal people, for as little as 15 cents in a day. If you look at the fact that you're also supplying 800 million people, 80 crore people, 3 meals of dry ration in a day, which is continuing since the pandemic. You do a dry ration plus you're providing very, very reasonably priced clean cooking fuel. I mean, what more can you say? And then we talk about characterizations of states being right and left. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes. Today, the biofuel story is galloping. Today, I can recall in 2006 when I was appointed ambassador to Brazil, my first interaction, one of the first interactions in Sao Paulo was with the then president of Unica, a brilliant man. And he told me in a first meeting, Ambassador, if you can get India to join the biofuel story. I was a bit sheepish, but in 2006, we didn't even have that 1.5% blending. In 2006, we were setting targets, I was writing letters, I was telling people do it. So much so that when I used to come from Brasilia to Delhi, a lot of friends in government and others saw me coming and said, here comes ethanol. Because I'm pushing the story from there. But it's a fact. In 2014, when the Honorable Prime Minister took over, what did he do? He completely changed the ecosystem. Today, I don't worry about if somebody wants to set a very high procurement price for, say, one particular feed, and people crib that this is too high. Very good, the market will take care of it. They won't go there. They'll go to another feed. Market, technology, and constructive, benign government policy. These are the 3 things which are required, and I think you have them in abundance here. As I said, the full credit for this kind of transformation goes to the Honorable Prime Minister. We have faced many roadblocks. When I was in Brazil between 2006 and 8, I had visiting Indian ministers saying, "Kyun itna biofuel kare? Aapko pata hai, isme aapke yahan food ki problem ho jayegi." I should tell them even then, I said, look, we are not dealing with what you think we are dealing with. And I'll come to the size of the biofuels market in a minute, but I want to give you one statistic which I think sums up, some statistics which sum up where we stand. The foreign exchange saving from 2014 to 24, these are figures up to only August, was 1 crore, no, 1,000, what is 1,06,072 crores just over that 10-year period. 1,06,000 crores. The carbon dioxide emissions lowered during that period, 544 lakh metric tons. The crude oil substitution achieved during that period, 181 lakh metric tons. The amount paid to distillers by OMCs, 1,50,097 crores. and amount paid to farmers. To me, that's the most important. All those guys who throw this, you can't do this because it will affect this economy. The farmers earned 90,059 crores. These are the real facts. And let me tell you, we still haven't got to, I want to, by the way, when I was in Brazil, Ambassador, your minister and Petrobras and all the excellent meetings that you arranged for me, they told me that you would be moving from 27% to 35% blending. And today you announced that you've already done it in the basic fuel. Well, I'm not in a position to make an announcement, but I can tell you there are a lot of people in the government of India, including me, who are already talking about preparing a roadmap for the post 20% blending after 2025. We are already talking about it. I talked about the entrepreneur who looked at the world map, and I think I got digressed after that. He saw that that continent didn't have LPGs. So what he did was he took a manufacturing unit in India, produced 1 million cooktops, exported them to that country, and started importing 93-octane ethanol from there. And there is another story there. This is what I call Global Biofuels Alliance Cooperation. So what the president of UNICA told me then, and with bears recollection, that if India joins the story, you would have Brazil, United States, and India, 3 large countries with an ability to produce, consume, and also to trade in ethanol. And I think that is the real story. I'm not looking for my prepared comments, but yes, there's some things I want to share with you. Approximately 25% of the increase in demand globally over the next 2 decades on energy is likely to come from India. These are figures which a lot of international agencies have put out. The question that arises is, how much of that increase in demand are we able to meet from cleaner fuels and how much by traditional fossil fuels? Now, you don't need to address this issue only in terms of philosophy and desirability, because I think anyone who has a concern for the planet would want the entire increase to come from biofuels, clearly. But then you need to produce that capacity. Why am I mentioning this figure? Because during my visit to Brazil, one of the most fascinating discussions I had with many of your companies and others was Brazil's plans for producing sustainable aviation fuel in large quantities. Now, if you look around the world and look at what is happening in the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, on Corsair, whatever that body is called, and you look at the chatter, you know, if you are in the business of listening into what people are saying, then there's a lot of chatter on SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. Why is there? Some of it is being encouraged because aviation consumes a very large amount of fuel, what we call aviation turbine fuel. But more important, there is now talk of norm setting by the European Union. And by the norm setting, it means that they would prescribe that by a particular year, 5% of all sustainable aviation fuel 5% of all aviation fuel would have to be sustainable in a blending. How will you implement it? There are different ideas floating around. One idea which I think has its genesis or root somewhere in Singapore with a lot of bright people working on it, is that when you buy a ticket, there will be a particular charge, minimal, but it will be added to the ticket. That will be a kind of a green charge, and that will then be transferable. I'm not going to take up because I'm fascinated by it, and I can go on talking and interacting with you on that. I ask myself a simple question. When I sit in Europe, and a lot of work on sustainable aviation fuel is being done by highly industrialized countries in the West, small population, very high per capita income, where they are doing work on sustainable aviation fuel. But much before this chatter was heard, I had, during the course of a demonstration flight which was received from Pune to Delhi, which had 1% sustainable aviation fuel blending, it was an AirAsia flight, when we discovered that to have a 1% mandatory blending, we needed 14 crore liters, if memory serves me right. Huh? Correct, no? 14 crore. And I said to myself, and sitting there, without any approval from anybody, but I did some forward thinking. Knowing fully well what's happening in the world, I decided to utilize that opportunity, which I think was at the Indira Gandhi International Airport, where you had this AirAsia flight, you had all the airline people, you had my friend Shishir, a lot of people there. And I said, we will start and aim at 1% blending by 2027, 2% blending by 2028, 3% blending by 2029. I'm surprised nobody asked me, where did you pick these figures out from? It's become part of the accepted thing. Because it's a target which I set as the Minister for Sustainable Fuel Production, and it was accepted. Sometimes ministers make statements and there is a volley of, eruption. I tried to avoid those situations. I tested the waters. And I'm very happy to tell you, Tarun, last week, I had the privilege of co-chairing a meeting on sustainable aviation fuel, which had all our airlines. All our airlines means the bigger users. You had Air India, you had Indigo, you had representatives of the Environment Ministry, you had representatives of the Food Processing Ministry, my secretary, Petroleum and Natural Gas Secretary was there, a huge hall full. And we discussed specifics on how to go forward. Well, there were still some people turning around and saying, well, not in that meeting, another one. I said, no, but we have to do this, we are difficult. Look, there will be, if not vested interests, and I'm choosing my words carefully, there are people with set mindsets. A lot of us in the room, if you have, say, 500 people in a room, there will be a certain percent who will say, ho hi nahi sakta. When I became ambassador to Brazil, and I got fascinated by the biofuel story, I had a very senior officer who was then, I think, CG in Sao Paulo, and he told me कि आप ऐसी बात कर रहे हैं, ये तो बहुत लोगों ने कोशिश किया तो हो ही नहीं सकता. Entirely possible. But that does not absolve the champions of industry here, sitting here, Paraj Industries sitting there, or people like the ambassador and me who are in the world of diplomacy or politics, of not trying. And once the narrative sets in and there is a wider acceptance of the desirability of a thing, you will find things are happening much faster. My friend Tarun, whilst we was discussing this, he told me ki E100, you brought up the issue of E100. And I told him that E100 as a fuel is already being retailed in 400 of our outlets in 4 states. The oil marketing companies assure me that they can scale it up. So now the question arises, why are we retailing E100 fuel if there are no takers? No, it's like the chicken and egg story. I can't convince the automobile manufacturers of sending E85 vehicles because he'll turn around saying there's no fuel. But I had no difficulty in convincing the OMCs to manufacture E100 We had a very far-sighted, visionary chairman of Indian Oil. When I had a chat with him, Gadkari ji, and I had within 2 minutes he agreed. Because if you have a fuel like E100 available, and if you are doing, say, using a tractor, you will be tempted to go there and get that tractor converted. And the marketplace and technology will take care of the rest. I don't want to go into greater details of what discussions we've had with the automobile manufacturers and others. Why does Shishir go to Brazil and produce a plant? Because the Brazilians have one kind of experience, which is world leading, but there may be something he's doing that he still has economic opportunity for. And why should we be shy of bringing in, where my real story, and we have got it done only partly, is to produce ethanol from second generation, which is from agricultural waste, broken food grain, third generation from industrial gases, from bamboo. I think the first plant is coming up in another month or so. So these are the changes which are taking place on the ground. Now, how much is the market worth? I had some figure somewhere here. It says the difficulty of not using your prescribed text. But by the way, should release this, a lot of good material there. But I think the market today should be about $44, $45 billion, biofuel market. It is expected to grow by 2050 to $125 billion. And if you get into your net zero issue, it could be even higher. So the limited point I'm making is, and by the way, I don't think this takes into account the sustainable aviation fuel equation at all. Because if you go for 5% mandatory blending of SAF in pursuance of a mandate, you will show that this will also gallop much further. I want to come to the green hydrogen story for a few minutes because I think these are all ultimately interlinked. Yes, as per International Energy Agency, there will be a 3.5 to 5 times biofuels growth potential by 2050 due to net zero targets, creating a huge... I wanted to cite that figure. I mean, where am I getting that figure? It's an IEA figure. India, with a projected agro-biomass power potential exceeding 35 gigawatts by 2030, stands positively poised to significantly augment India's energy landscape. We have more than 750 million metric tons of available biomass from crops, with around 2/3 of the total biomass produced being used for domestic purposes and other purposes like cattle feeding and compost fertilizer. This is, I think, figure is very important to realize where we need to take this discussion further to. I'm talking about the work which is being done by our OMCs in consultation with the states. I want to conclude but before I conclude, I want to talk about green hydrogen. Today, I think India has clearly demonstrated an ability to bring the cost per unit of clean solar energy down from 25 cents a unit to about 3 cents or so. Just about every electrolyzer manufacturer in the world is today participating in India. Not only because we offer that 19,700 crores of productivity-linked incentive, which the Honorable Prime Minister had approved, the Cabinet approved some time ago, but also because there is some inherent advantage in the green hydrogen story in India. Because the gas does not lend itself to transportation, so green hydrogen typically succeeds where there is local demand, local production, and local consumption. And again, I think countries like Brazil and India naturally suggest themselves for sustainable aviation fuel production, not only for them, but for other countries. Equally, countries similarly placed as India lend themselves as particularly attractive destinations for the production of green hydrogen. Is that happening? My response to you and my submission to you is it is happening at a pace which people are not able to even comprehend. We do a monthly meeting, I'm sorry, sometimes it takes longer, where we get all the captains of industry, other technology startups, etc., in order to see what is happening on the green hydrogen thing. I'm very happy, finally, everybody seems to have, most of us have our act together. We are now setting targets for that transition. We are floating tenders to achieve that. The figures may appear in the start of the process somewhat modest. I'm going by our set target of by 2030 is 5 billion metric tons. But at the end of the day, the green hydrogen story, like the biofuel story, is ultimately dependent on cost. My position is very clear. If you make the biofuel so expensive that people are not willing to make the transition for sustainability because it becomes unaffordable, then you have a problem. Equally in biofuels and green hydrogen, the cost becomes therefore crucial. Today, people will tell you that we can produce it at this cost, that cost. I take all those assessments with not a pinch, but a bag full of salt. Because if you can actually bring it down from the $5 or plus that it is currently there, that is $5 per kilo, you will get a situation where at $2.5, the $150 billion that you are spending on the import bill on fossil fuels, there will be a massive public pressure to shift that into green hydrogen production. And I think that is the real story. And not the story about, the report I read, which is, I think, completely bizarre. Look, when we started our agriculture and process, we were not unmindful of how to do it. But you are looking at that point of time with the options available. Today, if pump storage plants, which have already succeeded, if they catch on, where you will be able to take water to a particular height, produce clean electricity, and then you have a storage facility on site so that you can utilize the energy when the benefits of nature are not available to you, that is the answer. And the kind of stories I hear now talking to youngsters in terms of technological upgrades, what they are doing on this sector, fills me, again, I'm very cautious with words, with not just reasonable confidence, much more than reasonable confidence, that the biofuel story, that the green energy transition, the green hydrogen story is not only taking off, but taking off very well. And the Global Biofuels Alliance, under which sub-item that we are having this discussion, I think is destined in times to come to do great things. We signed, I think, the headquarters agreement last week. And I think when you meet under the very far-sighted Brazilian presidency of the G20 next month, we would have, because Brazil is the linear progenitor, or that is where the biofuel story started. So I'm sure this Biofuels Alliance will receive further impetus, and more young entrepreneurs will see the opportunities that this green energy sector has to offer for the larger good of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. We thank all the speakers for their insightful addresses.